Hello everyone, from today on I will begin a new series of videos where I explore basic mathematical concepts through philosophical analogies. The goal here isn't to reduce one to the other, but to help you imagine math in a more humanities way, or vice versa, to help understand philosophical ideas more clearly through the lens of math. The concept we are talking about is the limit. In the introductory course of calculus, the formal definition you may usually encounter is this: limit x approaching to a, which can also be written as there exists some delta greater than 0, such that x minus a is smaller than delta while greater than 0. In plain language, it means that x is always getting closer and closer to a, but never actually reach or become a. There is always a non-zero distance between x and a that keeps them always distinct and never fully identical to each other. The distance here, however, cannot be defined as any particular positive number delta. While delta is an arbitrary small number, the distance x minus a is always something even smaller than delta. It is smaller than 1, smaller than 0.1, smaller than 0.001, while not being small enough to become 0 or cease to be a distance. To put it romantically, imagine someone X endlessly get closer to his love, A. He can be closer than any possible kind of distance in the world, closer than her co-workers, closer than her other friends, closer than her family. Yet there's always a tiniest uncrossable gap between them. He approaches but never fully become one with her. So each of them remind us two different individual beings. In math or physics, the concept limit x approaching to a enables us to analyze behaviors of value near 0 or infinity, without actually having to touch 0 or infinity. Given that x is a real finite number thanks to the delta, we can solve many questions while avoiding considering the massive philosophical questions, such as the ontology of 0 or infinity. This mathematical concept, always approaching but never arriving, remind me of something central in the philosophy of the French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. Maybe by coincidence, there is an important concept in Lacan's theories named the object A. So the object A is the object of our desire and attachment, something we lack and seek. But like its vague name has indicated, object A is not a concrete particular object that we can be conscious of or attain, unlike other objects such as money, reputation, love, knowledge, or health. Rather, since its objectivity is so vague, we can only experience it as a sense of lack, something we feel is missing, but we can't quite name what we have missed, for the knowledge or memory about it is also missing. An object A can be represented as anything, but it also cannot be anything. There is always an uncrossable distance between us and the knowledge or satisfactions of this object A. This vague sense of lack motivates us to figure out what it is that we lack, what object A is. So what happened? To reach a state of satisfaction, we project that desire onto some specific object, let's say it's money, as an attempt to figure out what the object A we seek, we lack, and presume the money as an attempt to overcome our sense of lack. But after attaining this particular money, we realize, wait, this wasn't it. The feeling of emptiness returns, and we have to imagine or set a new object of desire again. The impossibility of knowing or attaining object A drives the endless reproduction of our desire and corresponding activity toward a particular object in the world. See the connections? Like in calculus, we x are always approaching to the object A, but the gap never disappears, nor we can really define what the gap is, because it's just something smaller than delta. Like the Sisyphus pushing the stone, we approach, but we never arrive. Now here is where it gets deeper. Lacan more radically stated that our subjectivity, our very transcendental sense of being, does not exist as x desiring the object A, but instead in the undefinable, unmeasurable gap between x and A. In other words, our subjectivity functions as a tension between delta and 0, being and nothingness, that prevent x and A from becoming one, prevents the consciousness who is desiring from being satisfied by the objects being desired. Our first-person perspective, consciousness, who desire, think, and act, are not identical to the subject. nor can we be conscious of the subjectivity, make subjectivity the object of our consciousness. Let us see this distinction by assuming some scenario where there is no longer subjectivity, the tension distinguishing the desiring consciousness and the object of desire. Once X becomes completely identical to A, once the desire is perfectly satisfied, then the consciousness will lose its existence, because a consciousness, to exist, must exist as a distinctive and alienated being from the objects. Without subjectivity, the consciousness will vanish into a sub-object. In an imaginative scenario, we can say that a baby may have a similar existential state. To a baby, there is no conscious distinction between its internal self and the external world, which is alienated from and against the former. If all the objects it wants can be immediately and easily attained, say like an apple, then there's no need for him to develop any consciousness about itself, about the apple, or about the world around it and the apple. It will not consider the apple as something other than itself, nor will it consider itself as something other than that other. No consciousness will arrive, or using Heidegger's language, the phenomena of the world will remain undisclosed. The moment when desire is restricted, when it wants the object apple but cannot get it, is when consciousness begins. The trauma of separations forced the baby to construct an ego, to reflect on what exactly is the thing being desired, what is restricted against the desire, and who is the one with the desire being restricted. This is like a moment in the Bible when Adam and Eve desire the fruit of wisdom, become separated from the Garden of Eden, and develop humanity. Only in this moment, with the tension of subjectivity, can the baby exist with the identity as a baby, and the apple can exist with the identity of an apple, so can the world exist as a region of identity. I will explain what this initial illustration is in the next video by drawing the analogies between the limit and the further order. Now let's focus on the effect of the restriction here. So to Lacan, we who are watching YouTube and thinking now here are already the neurosis being, the product of unconscionable subjectivity, suffering from the desire toward and the distinction from the object. Without subjectivity, there will no longer be the otherness, so there will no longer be selfness, which is the mental state a psychosis being may experience. In philosophy like Buddhism, there is also ideal and ontology like letting the subjectivity stop mediating, so that the consciousness will stop desiring and the object will stop being distinctive. The gap between X and A will collapse, and both the self on the side of X and the object phenomena on the side of A will be dissoluted. The whole coordinate system will collapse into nirvana, nothingness. Well, let's not go into that pessimistic. In fact, there is still an important question we have to ask. What role does the gap actually play between X and A? Is it just a byproduct of the two? Lacan, potentially Hegel, will make a radical ontology statement saying that the existence of both X and A, the consciousness and object, is set by the subjectivity as the tensions in between. It is not the case that there is an objective coordinate system lying on the table, fixing X here and A there, with an objective distance from each other. Instead, X, A, and even the whole coordinate system are the effect of the tensions of the subjectivity. This ontology is meant to challenge our famous philosopher Kant. To Kant, human as a rational subject is the X, and the truth, the perfections, is the A. Humans are limited in their own phenomenon world in the size of X, but cannot grasp the thing in itself in the size of A. A is absolutely external to the X. As a result, humans can only repeatedly attempt to approach the A through ethical practice experiments, such as, well, not telling lies despite they may kill your best friends. But it is impossible for humans to actually reach the truth or perfection of God. Such impossibility makes possible the freedom of humans. Hegel, however, treats the subject as a tension between X and A. Instead of presupposing the existence of coordinate system X and A through a series of idealist approaches such as dialectic logic, he demonstrated that the ontology priority of subjectivity. Both X and A emerge from the tensions of subjectivity through contradictions and self-negations, and their seemingly externality from the subjectivity is also set by the subjectivity. That is, in Lacanian's language, both of them are initially the internal trauma of the subject and being externalized and alienated. With the internal trauma and to get rid of the internal trauma, the subjectivity constantly reproduces the illusion that there is something else and something new outside as the object A, and bring the vulnerability and limitation of the consciousness X, while in fact the subjectivity itself is the source of the problems. If we go one step forward into Hegelian philosophy, we might even say that the tendencies of subjectivity is itself the absolute, the God. With this impossibility of perfection, the absolute prevents itself from being in the circular repetitions of self-relating, self-loving, and self-fulfilling. The absolute no longer plays the intellectual game of repeating x equal to a equal to x equal to a equal to x. Now, because x no longer equal to a, and x minus a no longer equal to any delta, the tension becomes more complicated. This tension of subjectivity is how the absolute finalizes itself and sublays the contradictions between freedom and necessity. This dialectic movement of the absolute in Marx's philosophy is exposed as the historical movement of class struggle. Well, I don't want to go over topic, so if you are interested in this, please let me know, and maybe we can open a new video talking about Hegel's and Marx's dialect. This view of subjectivities brings us back to the easy and more relatable example made by the Lacanian philosopher Jacques. When we're talking about whether AI can think like a human, or human thinking is nothing more than a biological computer, the answer does not lie in either one of particular size. We cannot find the delta to measure how much is the human similar to or different from AI. Instead, it lies in the hesitation and skepticism between the two, the gap, or questioning, am I a human or AI? Am I living in a material reality or a matrix? Similarly, for a religious believer, the true relation with God does not lie in either to enthusiastically believe in or not believing in God's existence, in either to blindly follow God's doctrines or to indulgently ignore all the moral rules, but instead in the wavering skepticism between the two. Does God really exist? Should I be a moral person? Here again, the key point is not about changing X, getting A, or measuring delta, but rather the tension between the question and answer is itself the answers. Okay, that is it for today's videos. I hope these analogies between limit and Lacanian philosophy can give you a new insight to view both calculus and philosophy. In the next episode, I might explore how the concept of further orders relate to the concept of limits, moving deeper into the psychoanalysis side. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumb up and subscribe to me. If you have any suggestions or interesting topics, please also let me know.